Hello everyone, welcome to the Introduction to Sociology 2. Today the module that we are going to cover will talk about the techniques and tools of data collection. Now, before trying to start to understand about what the tools and techniques for data collection is, we will try to understand the term data. So basically, data is the raw, unorganized facts that needs to be processed. It is something simple and seemingly random but useless until it is organized. On the other hand, information is when data is processed, organized, structured, or presented in a given context to make it useful. So, data is various kinds of information formatted in a particular way. And when information is processed further, it provides knowledge. Coming down to understand what tools mean. Tools is something which again we use in our daily life. Now, tool is something that helps us to get something accomplished. In research also, tool is something that helps us to get the information. So, tool is an instrument or simple piece of equipment that through which work is accomplished. On the other hand, data collection is the process of gathering and analyzing data, whereas data collection tools are the devices used to gather these data. Now, qualitative research focuses on words and meanings. Quantitative research deals with the figures and statistics. Tools for data collection are usually used to collect data mainly from the primary sources. Now, what is the need for data collection? Data provides us knowledge to the research. It helps to get an in-depth idea about the problem. It links to existing theories. It also provides better arguments and improves the quality of the research. Now, if we come to an example of a talk show or if we read something in the newspaper, we see that different interviews come up and they discuss about a particular issue or a particular person. Say for example, the Coffee with Karan conversation which is put in words in written form by a professional about a particular person who is famous in that area. So, in research, we see that interview is one of the popular methods to get the data collected. Researchers has the freedom to decide the format and content of questions to be asked, select the words of questions, decide the way to ask them, and choose the order in which they are to be asked. Now, this process of asking questions can either be very flexible, where we have the freedom to think about and formulate questions around the issue being investigated, or inflexible, where we are stuck strictly to the question decided beforehand, including their wording, sequence, and the manner in which it is to be asked. Therefore, when we talk about interview, it might have a flexible structure or an inflexible structure based on the type of issue which we are trying to focus on. Now, interview has its own advantages where it tries to identify the right respondent. It tries to provide scope for detailed assessment. It is a great source of information and increased knowledge. It helps us to get a better understanding of the respondent, and it provides a scope for better information. On the other hand, the limitations of interview includes time consumption, risks of personal bias. At times, it is hard to verify the truth of the interview, and ultimately, the outcome of the interview is quite unpredictable. The next type that we are going to discuss on is the interview schedule or we generally call it as schedule. It is also a type of interview where we have a set of questions which are mostly predefined. It is a set of questions where the questions are predefined on the basis of the aim or objective of the study. Now, when a researcher is using a set of questions for interview purpose, it is known as schedule. A list of questions formulated and presented with specific purpose of testing an assumption or hypothesis is part of interview schedule. And in schedule method, interview occupies a central and plays a vital role. As a matter of fact, success in the use of schedule is largely determined by the ability and tact of the interviewer rather than by the quality of the questions posed. In interview, we focus on the objectives or the aim of the study. With that focus, we either have a predefined set of questions or we go according to the flow of the respondent as and how the problem is emerged. Now, depending if a formal set of questions has been formulated, the types of interview schedule are of two types: the structured or the formal and the unstructured or the informal. Coming to the types, structured is a type of interview schedule where we have the predefined set of questions. So we have the predefined set of questions, keeping it, and we formulate those questions based on the aim of the study. And it is mostly used in descriptive research. On the other hand, in exploratory study, we try to explore something. So what happens is, keeping the objective in our mind, we may start at one point and then we move on depending on the types of response we get from the respondent. So it's something which emerge from the issue or the respondent's conversation. On the basis of the number of respondents dealt during the interview, we have the focus group discussion, the individual interview, and the in-depth interview. Let us discuss about each type in very brief. Focus group discussion. Focus group, as the name implies, it's a set of group with at least 8 to 12 members with the similar background or facing the similar type of problems. With that set of individuals, the researcher starts with collecting the information about a particular issue, and he or she tries to get the information from each of the individuals in a natural setting. On the other hand, we have the individual interview where it is on a one-on-one basis. We try to gather the information from the individual respondent from the perspective of the researcher's information that needs to be fulfilled when we are trying to come up with the research. In-depth interview is a substantial instrument where we go into the depth. It could be an interview about only one respondent covering the different aspect of the problem. The next type of tools for data collection is the questionnaire. Now, if we look around, we will see that we notice a lot of customer feedback forms or online surveys. Now, these customer feedback forms or online survey is basically a set of questions where we see that the respondents, if they are not even reachable, we can reach them through online mode. So, the basic difference between the interview schedule and the questionnaire is the interview schedule, the researcher himself or herself is present to collect the data. On the other hand, in questionnaire method, when we have difficulty or challenges to reach the respondent, we may use the questionnaire method. Now, the definition of questionnaire in research, it is probably the most used and most abused data gathering device. It is easy to prepare and to administer. It is the device for securing answers to questions by using a form which the respondent will fill by himself. Now, questionnaire is a systematic compilation of questions and an important instrument being used to gather information from widely scattered sources. It is normally used when one cannot see personally all of the people or the respondents from whom he desires responses, or where there is no particular reason to see them personally. The best part of questionnaire is it is easy to tabulate, summarize, and interpret. So basically, we see that the respondent, if the respondent is not visible or is not reachable, we try to use the questionnaire method. On the other hand, to conduct a face-to-face interview, we try to gather data along with this interview. In terms of data collection, we also have a tendency to deploy the other methods as well. For example, when we are interviewing someone, we may use the observation method as well. Now, coming to the advantages of questionnaire method, it is economical, time-saving process and covers the research in a wide area. It is very suitable for special type of respondents where we are not able to reach as person, and it is the most reliable one in special cases. Also, there are few limitations when we talk about the questionnaire method. It is mostly limited to the responses obtained. That means what happens is sometimes we see that if there is a gap of understanding or there is a gap of perception between the researcher and the respondent, it becomes difficult for the researcher to get what information he is waiting for. On the other hand, the respondent might have his own understanding, and depending on that understanding, he comes up with the responses which may not fulfill the purpose of the researcher. It lacks personal contact. There is a greater possibility of wrong answers and more chances of receiving incomplete responses. Sometimes the answers may be even illegible and it may not be able to explain the problem because of the limited scope. Now let's come to understand the different types of questionnaire that are used in the research method. The first type is the questionnaire with open-ended questions. Open-ended questions, as the name implies, the questionnaire consists of questions which has no options. So basically, it is left to the respondent to come up with the answers as he or she wants to respond to certain questions. The second type, we have the questionnaire with closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions, again the name implies that we set questions within the questionnaire with numerous questions having numerous options. So basically here the respondent do not have their own choices to come up with. Rather, it has to go along with what the researchers' assumptions are. And then the third type we have is the combination. So combination of the both means we have a mixed set of questions in the questionnaire where we have the open-ended questions as well as the closed-ended questions. Let us come up with an example. See, in the diagram we see that if we try to gather information of consumers on a particular product used, it is difficult to reach out physically all the consumers. But if the consumers have some more to explain than what is limited to the questions, it becomes difficult. There is hardly any scope for the respondents to come up with their own choices, their own options, their own needs to be addressed when the consumer survey is being filled up. Now let's see what the basic difference is. There are technical differences between an interview schedule when used in research and the questionnaire. So questionnaire method, the data is gathered indirectly. That means the data is not being asked by the researcher directly. On the other hand, in interview method, data is gathered directly. In questionnaire method, no face-to-face contact is present between the two. In interview method, there is a face-to-face contact between the researcher and the respondent. In questionnaire method, the researcher should have good knowledge about the topic or the problem. Here, in interview method, the researcher should be skillful to pave the understanding of the problem. In questionnaire method, the respondent may hesitate or feel uncomfortable to write or explain few aspects. In interview method, the confidential information may be obtained if the interviewer is skilled. And lastly, in questionnaire method, it is only written information or in written form we can obtain the information, and in interview method, written information along with the observation make data collection stronger. The next type of data collection tool is the observation method. Now, in our daily life, we see that observation has been used as a technique to, when we try to get something done, we try to recollect what we have observed in our past. So, in our past experience, we try to look into the past and we observe few aspects and then we try to come to a conclusion. And that is how in research also we use the observation as one of the important tool. Particularly the definition of observation in research, it is again the most commonly used technique of evaluation research. It is used for evaluating cognitive as well as non-cognitive aspects of an individual. It is used in evaluation performance, interest, attitudes, values towards their life problems and situations. It is most useful technique for evaluating the behaviors of individual respondents. It is a technique of evaluation in which behavior are observed in a natural situation. This observation technique has its own advantages and limitations. We will go into a little bit details about it. The advantages are observation are reliable and valid technique of collecting data and information as the researcher is collecting the data by himself. We get the first-hand data through observation method. The record of observation is also available immediately and it is a simple, broad and comprehensive method. Observation is an oldest technique of data collection and to get direct information, observation is quite important. Coming to the limitations of observation, observation has a limited scope for its use because all the events cannot be observed directly. It is subjective in nature, thus it is time consuming. It is costly and energy consuming too. The presence of the observer at times influences the behavior of the respondent and thus the respondent becomes conscious. In case of COVID behavior which can't be observed, it is not useful. And lastly, the observer or the researcher should be trained enough and experienced to conduct this observation method. Now let's discuss about the types of observation. When we say about the types of observation, we might discuss the observation as the participant observation, non-participant observation, direct observation, indirect observation, controlled observation, and uncontrolled observation. Coming to the first type, the participant observation, again with the name if we go, the researcher becomes a participant in the whole research process. So what happens, for example, if we try to understand the culture of an individual or a group of people, the researcher may be a part of that particular community, say for example the tribal community. Second is the non-participant observation. In non-participant observation, the researcher is not a part of that community, rather an outsider who observes the incident or the issue from a certain distance to make some assumptions. The third type of observation is the direct observation, where the researcher gets a chance to observe certain things, certain phenomena, certain occurrences directly from the field. On the other hand, when we talk about indirect observation involves the absence of the physical presence of the researcher. For example, if we try to record certain things and then we come up with an assumption or finding, that may be a part of indirect observation. The next type is the controlled observation. Controlled observation is a type of observation that is carried out usually within the laboratory. For example, if we try to understand or come up with testing a hypothesis, we may use this type of observation. And the last type is the uncontrolled observation, which is mainly used in the descriptive study, and participant observation may be a part of this uncontrolled observation. Now, till now, we have discussed the various tools and techniques of data collection. Now, tools are the one which helped us to get the information, and utilizing the tool or implementing the tool is the part of the technique. Now, when we talk about the techniques of data collection, techniques help us to analyze the data. So, the data needs to be used. It's not that we just gather the data. We need to process them, analyze them, and use them to get some concrete information. Or we try to analyze some aspects, or we try to test some hypothesis. So to do so, we see that data analysis are of many types. On the basis of tools, we have two types of data analysis. One is the descriptive and the other one is the inferential. On the other hand, on the basis of the variables, we have the univariate, bivariate and the multivariate data analysis. And on the basis of the nature of the data, we have the quantitative data analysis and the qualitative data analysis. And when we talk particularly about quantitative data analysis, that means it deals with numbers or statistics. So dealing with this number, we have typically three families of quantitative data analysis, and the first one is the test from chi-square family. The second is the test from t-test family, and lastly we have the test from correlation family. Now we will try to look into what type of test are we going to utilize when we are talking about a particular study. Say for example, the purpose of the study is to compare, not to look into the relationship, and the type of data we have is the categorical data. Then we need to use the chi-squared family. On the other hand, we are trying to compare the study and we are trying to look into the categorical data as well as the continuous data, we might opt for t-test family. And if we are trying to look into the relationship and we have a data which is continuous in nature, that's continuous data, we might opt for correlation family. So in a summary, we can say that chi-square is used when we try to compare the data and the data are categorical in nature. In t-test, we try to compare and we have both types of data, categorical as well as continuous. And in correlation, we try to look into the relationship only with the data type which is continuous in nature. Till now, we discussed about the quantitative analysis. Looking into the qualitative aspect, we have 6 different types, that is thematic analysis, content analysis, grounded analysis, discourse analysis, narrative analysis, and phenomenology or heuristic analysis. Now, thematic analysis is commonly used and the foundational method for qualitative data analysis. At the very beginning, we try to familiarize with the data, we try to generate initial codes, we try to organize those codes, we try to, combine the similar types of concepts. Then we search for the themes, we review the themes and come to a conclusion, and then we define and name the theme. For example, we have the code like active, willing, accountable, responsible, motivated, and we can emerge the theme as individual participation. The next is the content analysis, where the study purpose is to look for the frequency of words, patterns, and sometimes the sequence of the occurrence. And it determines the difference of certain words or concepts. The themes or categories emerges based on the selection of words or concepts inductively. And this can be books, interviews, websites, newspapers, speech, or other related materials, which helps us in content analysis. The next is the grounded analysis. Here we do not start with a definite point. We allow data to speak, as our purpose is to formulate theory or a framework. Here we conduct multiple rounds of interviews as needed, write a detailed diary on field note, or collect any other significant data like documents, pictures, etc. After initial coding from all the sources of data, we compare codes to find consistencies and differences. The next is the discourse analysis. It is a linguistic analysis of flow of communication. It also takes into account the social context where communication occurs. It is strictly concerned with the study of grammars, sounds, parts of words, and their meanings. The next is the narrative analysis. It examines how the participants construct their stories based on personal experiences. This mainly involves personal stories, entire life story, significant events and situations. This mainly identifies the non-verbal expressions, the pauses, filler words, all non-verbal signs and gestures. The last is the phenomenology. This focuses on how human view or experience the world. This method emphasizes on bracketing out the researcher's own role and only focuses on the participants' experiences. Now, we have already discussed about the quantitative data analysis and the qualitative data analysis. But a research cannot be fixed or cannot be defined with a particular type of data analysis. So, mostly there is a chance that we use one or more type of data analysis, and that is where the triangulation comes. Now, what is triangulation? So, it is the use of multiple methods or multiple data sources in qualitative research as well as quantitative research to develop a comprehensive understanding of the phenomena. Thus, triangulation is used to increase the validity and ensure the quality of the study. So, with this, we come to a conclusion where we have come to know about the different tools of data collection and the skills, the advantages and the limitations that each of the tools have to use it as a technique, because we said that tools turns to be a technique when tools are implemented in a scientific manner. And the use of data, if we look into it, we will see that data are of two types, the quantitative aspect and the qualitative aspect, and based on those purpose of the research, we have the different types of analysis.